Welcome everyone to the modernization of Maximo. We still have some folks joining, so we will begin in just a few moments. Welcome everyone to the modernization of Maximo. This webinar is being recorded and we will send an email link to it and a copy of the slide deck within 24 hours of the broadcast. We will be muting the phone lines throughout the presentation. If you have a question, please enter it in the question box. We also highly encourage you to participate in our polls. This will help us develop presentations dedicated to your specific concerns and questions. So again, thank you for joining us for the modernization of Maximo, moving beyond the myths. I'm Kat Bullen. Myself and Natasha Heyman will be the facilitators for this fireside chat surrounding the myths of upgrading IBM Maximo Application Suite. Today's myth-busting panel is made up of leading experts in IBM Maximo from around the world. During this very high-level informal discussion, we will address some of the concerns we've heard from both our clients and in the wild. Our panel consists of Candy Robeson, Business Director with over 20 years of IBM Maximo experience, Tony Turner with more than 25 years of Maximo service, Patrick Conity, Services Director and Resident Mobile Expert, and Miles Vivian, our Services Manager and IT Guru. So who is Cohesive? Cohesive is the world's largest IBM Maximo implementer and an IBM Platinum partner. As a full asset management lifecycle consultancy and digital integrator, we bring together experts and tools along an asset's entire roadmap, from bidding to retirement. So today's format, again, is a little different than our standard webinars. During this free-form discussion, our panel will cover each of these topics for maybe around 10 minutes or so, with each of the experts discussing the top myths and legitimate concerns that we've heard. As a result of this conversational format, don't be alarmed if we deviate slightly from the slides or the topics themselves. Moving forward, we will host webinars dedicated to these topics using your input to create educational presentations addressing your particular concerns and questions. And there are a lot of questions, concerns, and misinformation out there around MAS. Let's take a look at some of the myths we've heard and clarify some of the confusion. So Natasha, let's go ahead and launch our first poll. Okay, which are some of the statements that concern you the most? And just go ahead, you can check all that apply. IBM Maximo Application Suite is too expensive. The upgrade requires extensive training on a new system. MAS will not be supported on my current mobile need. Will not support my current mobile needs, pardon me. MAS takes too long to implement. And MAS requires complicated infrastructure upgrades and support. And we're just going to go ahead and give everyone just a few more moments on the poll. All right, we'll go ahead and close that down, and let's go ahead and move on to the first topic of our session, which is taking the anxiety out of the next phase. I know I've heard silver myths that have come out of client meetings? And Candy, I know that you've been visiting with many of our clients talking about upgrading to MAS. What have you heard that's causing the most amount of anxiety around upgrading, and what are those myths?
Thanks, Kat. I am super excited to be here today, and I'll just reiterate some of the things that Kat said. Um, Please make this interactive, put questions in the chat. We will follow up on everything and participate in the polls. That really gives us an indication of where we go next in this webinar series. I'm also going to give a shout out to Jeff and Stas. A couple weeks ago, we did a hosting webinar that was fantastic. So getting into the myths, Miles, Patrick, and I have been on a North American Mass tour, 2 shows, 7 and 10, and we're hearing a common theme, right? So transitioning to the Maximo Application Suite is going to be too expensive. So you've got the license component to it, you've got the moving from your either perpetual or term licenses to app points, and what does that look like? Sizing the infrastructure. So what does that look like for our clients as they move to OpenShift and I think, or have a cloud discussion, which is happening more and more as we meet with our clients to talk about the upgrade. Is this time to talk about a managed service, or what is your company's cloud strategy? And then the technical upgrade itself. So, is Maximo changing radically, and is there going to be a lot of upskilling? And so in my experience, and obviously I want Patrick, Miles, and Tony to jump in, because I think we now have a couple of years of experience in having these conversations. And we'll get into more detail. Tony has some really great numbers later on in the presentation, but it's not. Moving to app points is delivering flexibility. It's a great new licensing model. It's kind of the best of both worlds. If you've been in the Maximo community long enough, Tony and I were laughing about 411 and taking customers from concurrent to a registered or authorized named user model, and then back to concurrent. Now we're just going straight on to app points, so you can cash in and out and have the flexibility of that sort of token model. And I think that's over a 5-year period, some of our customers have actually recognized cost savings in that flexibility. So I think that's pretty exciting. The infrastructure options actually start to look very different in what you need based upon doing more of a usage assessment, right? What are your requirements, and how can we address that in your infrastructure, or help you look at what moving to cloud would mean for your Maximo environments.
So
I think go ahead, Miles.
You brought up the topic of the usage assessment, and that reminded me of something that I think we've seen with a couple of our clients, specifically related to licensing and kind of some legacy stuff that they've left in there. I remember we met with a client a few weeks ago, and they said they had Scheduler installed like 5 or 6 years ago in their dev environment, and they still had some licenses for it because they were stuck with it because they installed it in their development environment to test it out, and they're carrying these licenses, and a bunch of people have done a calculation for how many app points they have, but they forgot to exclude all these legacy bits that they have in their system, and have never assessed that and said, oh, maybe after not using Scheduler for 5 years, maybe I don't need that anymore.
It's such a good point, Miles. That's one of our clients. I talk to them every single year when they renew, because they have one Maximo for utilities license because they installed it. You can't uninstall it. And so then what happens? You continue to renew it because it impacts your upgrade, right? So this is an opportunity for us to really look at the landscape and make sure that your licenses align, which then ultimately it's also the sort of thing, Miles, that we've talked about leading up to this. Do you need 10 environments? Does that still meet your needs? And we'll get into it a little bit more, but it's also, sort of the customizations and where our customers have been and what does that look like going forward as they upgrade?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
that's
a
what-
lot of, oh, go ahead, Kat.
I was going to move on, but if you have another statement, go for it.
Yeah, I do have one more thing that I'd like to bring up is I think, you know, as we get rolling with OpenShift and as we get moving towards mass, I think there are quite a few people who are really hanging on to those old paradigms of what it looked like to have Maximo installed in WebSphere. And like, you know, I always, if I want a second dev environment or a third dev environment, I always need them there. And same, I think that is a little bit pervasive in a lot of areas in Maximo, because, you know, you don't need all of your environments up at the same time anymore. That's kind of the point of this. And like, you don't always need those scheduler licenses if you want to test it out now again. And I think that's, you know, I think that's, it's going to take a little bit of time for people to kind of get out of that rut and stop thinking about the old way that Maximo was used and managed. And I think that's just part of the transition, to be honest.
Yeah, and there are a lot of myths around licensing and a lot of concerns about the cost. So our next poll is going to be, what are your most pressing licensing concerns? So we'll go ahead and launch that next poll. All right. So some of the things we've heard, app points are more expensive than the current IBM Maximo licensing. Why do we have to move to concurrent licensing? Another question and concern we've heard is that app points are just confusing. Or why do we need to get the full suite of applications if we're only using manage? And we've got some more.
And those are great questions, Kat. I think those are the things, obviously, that we are hearing and talking to those specifically as people contribute to the poll. I think the cost is, it's time to relook at the landscape, as we said, do a usage assessment and really figure out what aligns to your roadmap going forward.
Right.
And there are different licensing models. So there are authorized app points, there are concurrent app points, and there's the ability to do both. So I think the flexibility that app points affords our clients, you really need to understand what the new model looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to close that poll. Looks like it's we've just closed that, and we're going to move on to some of those cost myths. And Tony, I think you've heard some pretty interesting numbers out there.
Right. Okay. Go back to the present. So, yeah, I mean, you say concurrent app points and authorized app points. The beauty about app points is there's just an app point. It's not like you've got 40 different Maximo products and you pick and choose and then you're committed to keeping those products. So as we said earlier, you know, the people who've got the one utilities license and they can't get rid of it and they're paying for it. Well, you know, it's no longer true. So these are the cost myths. You know, the Maximo Application Suite is too expensive. The word on the street, probably coming from the competitors, is that the mass upgrade is going to cost tens of millions of dollars. I suspect that there's certain other companies out there who are throwing this one in, and it requires a massive infrastructure. That frightens people. So these are not true. So why? Let's look at the different elements. There's three elements when you're doing an upgrade. You know, you've got the actual cost of the implementation itself. And you have a choice here. You can just do a pure technical upgrade. It's like doing an upgrade from 76108 to 76110. You know, it's a point upgrade, and it's quite easy. And it's the same functionality in Maximo, basically. So the current 7612 MAS 8 is the same functionality. So the database is the same for the Maximo application side of it. Or you can do a functional upgrade where you're going to take advantage of functions in Maximo that you're not using before. And very often, and this is the big one, is custom. People have customized Maximo over the years. Yeah, we've seen some customers. My record is about 500 JavaScripts. I believe that somebody else has seen 700 different JavaScripts.
Just this week we had to It's hard. When customers say that, I feel like I should never play poker because my face just will automatically be like,
And I
you did
need
what?
to clarify, it was 700 JavaScript files, not 700 customizations. You can have JavaScript files like database triggers. You can have plain Java customizations. That was like, I'm sure not even like, that's just the tip of the iceberg, which is crazy.
Well, as Kat says, I've been working with Maximo actually for 30 years. I've got one customer who's got the worst customization I think I've ever seen. It's vandalism, it's not customization. We have actually replaced it with a better solution in MAS, effectively with zero Java. We've actually used standard Maximo and configuration and getting the data right to eliminate all the customizations. Just as a comparison here, I know we've got time constraints. Recently, we took a pharmaceutical client, we took them from 7.6, we took them to MAS. There was no customizations because we'd actually done the project in the first place. They're a validated client, so every process, every workflow has to be tested, it's got to be validated and documented. So it's a very high level of governance. The whole thing costs 150,000, including moving to the cloud and deploying a mobile. It's not that expensive. For a demo system, my guys are doing it in 2 days. They'll stand up a new Maximo MAS and then move data from a legacy demo system to the new one as an upgrade, and it gets done in 2 days. That's the first thing. The second fear is the licenses. IBM charge 48.5% to basically move your current subscription to app points. And it's a one-time fee, and then you go back to your previous like-to-like conversion. It's high, it's expensive, but we can actually help you here because app points are so much more efficient. We can actually reduce the number of app points you require, which will offset that. And the third one is the infrastructure. So we're told, and in the early days on the Maximos, on the IBM sizing, it was a lot larger. So a MAS managed, they were quoting about double the size. But they've actually reviewed that, they've improved it, they've optimized it. And our experience is a hosted client moving from legacy managed to, EAM to manage, is about 13% more. So there is a little bit more, but it's not much. So all of those three are not really serious.
And Tony, I think to that point, I would love your thoughts on, since you have done this with clients, is there's a calculator that IBM provides to help customers size their environment. But again, it's almost like the script that we run to convert the app points. That's a current snapshot of where you're at today. So that's where I feel like we have the opportunity to help our clients with where they're going, not where you've been, right? So sizing that could change based upon what you see your needs being in the future. Do you think that's an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things there, Candy. There on the licensing side, yes, absolutely. There's a script, and then there's what you've deployed. So what you've bought, what you've deployed, and effectively what you need. So that's one. On the infrastructure side as well, you don't need predict and health and monitor if you're just using EAM. So there's no point to size your hardware 4 times the size to accommodate what you already have. So again, that is a way of saving. So what we do is typically we'll come out and do a license check with people, and then we work out the optimal licensing. And often we can actually save them money. It's actually cheaper to go with MAS than it would be to stay where they are.
And sorry, Tony, I think there's one thing to add to that too, that this is the step before running how many app points you need in your current entitlement, right? Like it's really taking a step back and building a strategy around the upgrade to say, we remove that HSE license that was tested 3 years ago, and we look at the total usage and how your security groups are actually set up. So we're not jumping right into what you need. And that's really critical in this step.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
exactly what I was referring to earlier with that client who has those like 5-year-old licenses just floating around that they're stuck with. I think, like reviewing all of that is exactly what Tony is talking about too. Like
Mhm.
you need to look at what you've been doing in the past and what you want your kind of like end state to look like as you move forward. And I think that's really applicable to both infrastructure and licensing. And well, I mean, obviously you want foresight for all of your Maximo implementation, but these are like top of the list right now, I think, as you're moving to mass.
And Patrick, on your example, yes, they got a couple of utilities licensed. They gave 2 guys access to them. They never took the access out, so they're still consuming that license, but they're not using it. So what we do is the first starting point is we look at your renewal and say, what's your entitlement? What you bought, and how's that convert to app points? And there's a calculator for that. We then run the scripts and find out what you're actually using. And Patrick, as you say, we don't take it as gospel because very often they say, well, why has that guy got access to the inventory? He never touches it. Why is he using purchasing? He's a maintenance engineer. So by reviewing that, they can actually reduce their deployment. They can look at the concurrency. Now, IBM's standard pricing mechanism, and Candy and I were laughing about this one as well, because we remember the 5.0 days, where the MRO said, well, you could have a client in Australia and then somebody in England and then somebody in the States and 3 people using the same license. So they worked on a 3-to-1 basis. The other argument is somebody says a 3-shift day, but traditionally they're working on a 3-to-1. Reality, it isn't. The power users are probably in Maximo 80% of the time. Some guys come in Maximo once a month for a couple of hours to approve a purchase order or something. So what we do is we look at the concurrency over the last 5 years. We look at your growth pattern and allow for some flexibility for growth and say, this is what we believe you need in terms of concurrent users. And the top numbers here, the ones in green, are in fact the best options. So we looked at the options and a couple of clients, big oil and gas company and a big oil field repair company, were 21% over licensed. They had too many points. If I translate that into money, let's assume their subscription was £250,000 a year. If we can reduce their license count by 21%, the 3 lines at the bottom are showing what that means. If they stay on their current 7.6 licensing and pay the typical uplifts that IBM charge every year, they'll be looking at about 1.68 million over the 5-year cost. If they go with the mass uplift, which is we're going to convert to mass, we're going to pay the one-time 48% uplift and then go back to the standard cost, it's going to cost them an extra 96,000. If they can reduce their app points over 5 years, like we're showing here in the green boxes, they'll actually make a saving of 276,000. Basically, by going with the app points, they're going to save money on licenses. This isn't even upgrading to mass. They can stay on 7.6. But if they change the licensing to app points, the efficiency of the usage of the app points will save them money.
And that's the part, Tony, that I was just going to say, I think, and we're not talking about reducing usage, we're talking about more effectively using your licenses. And so when you go back up to the top and look at the weighted concurrency, that's where you take authorized, limited, express, self-service requesters, and not having a shift-based or follow the sun model, but a role-based license, so that that's the way you can, the flexibility that app points affords you. Again, going back to, if you have users that are in all the time, make them authorized, park those licenses for those users, and then you can have a community of concurrent users that are cashing in and out because they're getting in and looking at a work order. They're doing something that's going to be very quick and in and out, so that those points cash back in, and you have that flexibility in the licensing. And so I think that's where there's also as we know, the authorized to limited to express required you to maintain certain ratios in those. And so, it really takes that out as well, so that you're just, you're licensed for what you're using. I also get excited because the application suite does deliver more functionality. So if you were making decisions based upon your budget, not wanting to buy additional perpetual named users, you can now actually look at the full manage what you want to adopt from Maximo, the industry solutions and the add-on solutions. And so you can start to look at growth. So, you know, in some ways we're talking about the, you know, sort of contracting. If you had installed a one utility license and you didn't actually have value in those applications. Conversely, you have clients who maybe haven't bought those industry solutions because of the cost. It's now delivered in manage, and I think that's the part that is exciting, is our clients can start to look at applications in those industry solutions. You know, management of change, HSE, there's scheduler and spatial, there's some really robust add-ons that they can use with these app points across their organization. And I think that's going to be the value that you're paying for in that uplift, beyond just the other applications that are being delivered, like monitor, health, predict, assist, etc.
So
no, you're right on that one. Yep. Sorry, sorry, Kat.
Oh, so I get to be the official timekeeper, folks. So we're going to move from the cost myths to functionality. Panel, what types of functionality concerns are being circulated out there?
I think the biggest one is that they look at this and they look at all of the stuff in the suite and go, oh my God, that's so complicated. Now, instead, I've bought Mass and I've been using what is effective or what is now managed, and they go, oh God, now I have to learn these like 7 or 8 other applications and add them to my team. And also, I guess, like associated with that, they're going to have to relearn how to use it because there's aesthetic changes to Maximo. And I think, you know, the aesthetic changes aren't really that big of a deal in my personal opinion. I think it's, you know, obviously there's lots of people that would say it is a very large challenge, and from a management of change perspective, it can be, but I think, you know, I've heard personally a few complaints from customers that Maximo looks like someone slapped a skin on an old DOS computer, and that's a little bit embarrassing when you go into a workshop and hear that. So it's nice to see that Maximo is finally starting to look like an application from this century, and you know, you're using it like you'd use your phone, and a lot of the kind of like the UI elements and the cues are going to be a lot more intuitive to people, and like who doesn't carry their phone with them pretty much all the time and use different apps on. Yeah, there you go, Candy.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, Miles. We all live and breathe by it. And I think those are the things that IBM has heard over the last 5 years and did a really good job of that modernization. So in one way, we talk about the upgrade being for manage based upon 7612. They've carried that code forward into the application suite. So it's not big, huge substantive changes in Maximo, now called manage. But there is a refresh of what it looks like. So the modernization, and so much of that is also prioritizing mobile in this conversation. They made a big investment in really creating a native mobile solution that gets delivered in the Maximo Application Suite. And I think those two things tied together is a great next step for our users, right?
And the questions about the UI changes too, right? Like as we've seen from 7.5 to 7.6 and 7.6 to 7.6.1, right? Like there will be changes with all software, but echoing what the other folks have said, is this is an improvement to adapt to what I think IBM has heard. We were doing a greenfield implementation for Mass, so most of the users were not familiar with it, but we're going through some scenarios, and we had a contractor walk by as a technician from 6.2 and said, oh, you guys are using Maximo here? That's familiar, right? So obviously they're not going to jump in and navigate around right away, but they quickly saw how the screen laid out and what they were going to be doing to navigate. So remembering that each of the applications are similar in their layout, and there's some good functional changes we've seen with IBM's focus on design and pushing this forward.
It
Oh,
is, and Patrick saying 6.2, you just reminded me, I just had a call with IBM last week to talk about, they're bringing IT back in. So think 6.2, think service desk, think a combined solution. And that's really gonna be great for a lot of our clients who in 6.2 decided to do that combined implementation and bring your IT assets into Maximo with that service desk component, and that's coming back in the suite as well. So that's going to be great, and more to come on that.
so this,
So
I
I love this slide. Yeah.
I do not. Well, I mean, I like this slide, but it gave me a heart attack the first time I saw it. I thought for sure they were trying to say you had to run all these applications at once every time you install Maximo Application Suite. And I was like, no wonder the hardware for this is so hideous, but you do not. And I think that's the
This
point.
is the difference between sales and technical. I'm like, yes, look at everything you get. Miles is like, no, thank you.
I think that's exactly what happened. That's why. Well, that's probably why one of the myths started about you need such this insane infrastructure around this, because some technical person looked at this and go, "Oh my God, how many servers do I need to set up to run all this stuff or just manage?"
So a great new feature of the application suite is the addition of a mature Maximo mobile solution. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to hit our next poll. And this poll is near to my heart as I was involved in Maximo Mobile Solutions for 15 years. I'm really excited about where this is heading. But some of the questions that we instead of asking what your concerns are, we want to know what mobile solutions you're using right now. Are you using, or I should, let me clarify that, I'm sorry. What mobile solution do you want to use with MAS? IBM Maximo Mobile, which is included in the suite. Do you want to continue to use Mobile Informer, Easy Max Mobile, Data Splice? Is there another system you're using laptops or tablets or none of the above? And I realize that last answer is pretty broad, but we were only limited to five selections. So we went ahead and chose the top mobile third-party contenders that are out there.
And in that, Kat, one thing that we didn't list, but is also obviously a consideration, is those clients that implemented Anywhere. Anywhere will be end of support, end of life, September of 2025, along with the 7.6.x Maximo versions. And so I think that's another thing that we didn't list here, but is a consideration. And we're happy to help clients look at transitioning off of that platform as well.
Okay,
Thanks.
so we've wrapped up that poll, and I'm going to throw this over to Patrick. What type of mobile myths are you hearing?
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, it's a great point, right, Candy, where the Anywhere has been end of life, right? So IBM has come and rebuilt mobile from the ground up. And as we meet with customers in person or have these conversations over the phone, they're starting to make a decision. IBM has made it enticing to include this as part of your app points. So there's no additional charge for this. They've also moved from 8+ apps, I think it was, and Anywhere now to a single mobile app. And then understanding where their current vendors are for third-party apps. I think the key takeaways for these are really going to be the businesses that are servicing you as a third-party vendor are not closing shop and moving to the Bahamas, right? They're going to continue to service you, and they are at different phases, but we are implementing third-party as well as mobile on customer projects right now for MAS. So there are a number of options, and it's important to assess that. Just like when you look to go to MAS, what are you doing with your licenses? You need to understand what your mobile strategy is and what do you need mobile to do for you. So absolutely, third-party apps are available. understanding how those integrate and work with code being based on 7612. This is not a massive technology shift from an integration standpoint, right? So it's going to be fairly straightforward there.
I mean, Patrick, it is not a huge technology shift from an integration perspective, but it is like a shift from an architectural perspective, like you described earlier. Like they went from having 8 different apps that you have to install on your phone to that single one, so you can access everything from there. And they just started using a new platform for Maximo Mobile, right? Like they've like basically rebuilt it.
Absolutely, right? So your work centers have been retired except for inspection forms, and we are moving to a different view portal, right? And sorry, I was saying more for the third-party vendors, that they will have to take on some of that effort, but for your clients or your users within Maximo, right? The idea is we'll still have an integration that comes in and transacts your mobile records, so, or however they're doing it currently. But looking at this, right, how do we see the value of checking out mobile? And this is, again, the advantage of being able to run a proof of concept, either in your dev or tertiary environment, very quickly. So with the containerization and value that OpenShift offers, you can quickly spin this up and trial this out as a proof of concept without using any app points. IBM moving to the continuous improvement, continuous delivery model, we've seen quicker releases, new features, LTS, the long-term support version of 8.10 coming out provides a very stable long-term version for customers to work on without major new features being released regularly. For those that want to get on the other release cycles, they can do that. And with those releases, we're seeing things like role-based applications. So you can use these mobile apps on the desktop or on your phone or / tablet, either in a connected or disconnected mode. So there's a lot of value in there. The main focus has started to be on work orders, and that's what you're going to have to assess. Are you going to run a pilot with just that, or are you going to look at it with your current solution and compare them side by side? But there's more functionality coming, which is what I'm excited about, and then the ability to make edits in mobile through the math tool as well.
Hey,
Yeah,
Patrick,
what we found with our customers, they're looking at especially the Anywhere users. They used to get bogged down in a work order that you had 8 different tabs that you had to go to complete a work order. With the new mobile, with the follow the blue button, basically we can lead you through what the best practice is, and it stops people forgetting to book their time and then moving on to the next work order or what materials they used. So we're getting a large positivity on it. My own feeling was Anywhere was 2 generations behind. Maximo Mobile is leading edge. So,
I agree. And Tony, one of the things that I had asked you this week was, I think this also enables our clients who maybe hadn't rolled mobile out to some of their users to go ahead and do that, right? Like we were saying, everybody has their mobile device now. So you're out in the field, you're capturing better data as you have these kind of role-based screens in the new mobile tool. And I think that allows, and again, going back to app points, it allows you to, I think, really easily roll this out to your users that maybe weren't using a mobile tool in the past.
Absolutely. And the other key thing, of course, is it's free, because if you're entitled to be a Maximo user, you're entitled to mobile. So effectively, there's no extra cost.
And I think in that poll, we listed the third parties, but a lot of customers that I talked to have actually created their own. So that falls into that last one, Kat, with other. And so why did they do that? Well, maybe they only needed one single component that they were using, and I think that would be a good time for them to look at whether or not that function is delivered in that combined solution that's delivered in the suite.
I think the other part of the mobile aspect is the role-based applications that I see on the screen. I know Patrick always loves demoing this. Every time we get to the thing, that's like the first thing he demos from a functional perspective. I think he's
this is no longer going to be a surprise now, Miles.
I know. I'm sorry, Patrick, I ruined it for you. The ability to move the columns, though, I know you're very excited about that. I think that's like your favorite thing about, about mass, arguably.
It absolutely is, right? And I think this is an indicator of what direction the design is going. So the work order role-based application does just that at a user level, allows people on the desktop to build a list tab custom to them. So we're moving away from some of these result sets we've seen over the years where customers have 10 result sets on a single start center and they're running all these complicated queries that are not being actioned. But we can build this now individually in your work order role-based application, and understanding that this will be rolled out to other applications in the future is absolutely a sign of a direction that we as implementers, and I've heard from customers, want to see.
I mean, I feel like that's a sign that IBM is really listening to users too. Like I know I've heard of a few people that we've talked to have been like, finally, I feel like we've been asking for this for like 10 years and they finally get to see it and they're so excited about it. But I feel like that is a good sign from IBM that they're trying very hard to listen to customers and actually like build that functionality in.
And that's a part and parcel of the whole new infrastructure that MAS is based on, and it's pretty incredible. I think it's pretty cool. The infrastructure topic has had quite a bit of conversation, and while we will be discussing some of the myths, let's go ahead and focus on some positive. What infrastructure changes are you most interested in, or why are they most what is of most interest to you? Containerization, OpenShift's scalability, Linux servers, easily install and test new functionality, woo, or none. This sounds like a complicated IT question. So we'll go ahead and leave that in for just a little bit longer while people answer those questions here.
I feel like the Linux servers answer is for a very specific set of people. I know there's so many people that I've chatted to that are like, oh yeah, I can't wait for Linux servers. They do exactly what you tell them to do. And then you talk to a couple of people who get a little nervous about that and they're like, oh God, they only do exactly what you tell them to do. I think that's so funny, but it does, I think that highlights like the little bit of extra control you get here and that IBM is really providing. And I think that's exciting. And I think, yeah, you get to do a little bit more than you did before on the old Windows servers. Obviously, I'm pretty excited about it.
The biggest myth that we had heard was that Mass Manage requires double the infrastructure of Maximo 7.1.2. And Miles, it sounds like this myth is completely busted.
Yeah, I think this kind of really centers around people's initial perception. Like going back to that slide of thinking, you have to run all of the components if you just want to use manage. But this also, like digging into that myth kind of requires a bit of understanding of how OpenShift is expected to be used. And, it's not the old WebSphere anymore, This is part of IBM's push to containerization and utilizing these newer technologies related to this. And utilizing orchestration as well. So basically the gist of why OpenShift is not going to require double the infrastructure is that you're expected, it's like main design is to be deployed on a set of servers or nodes, and you're supposed to have a clustered environment, which is, normally that's limited to a client's production environment, but that's kind of mainly how OpenShift is meant to be deployed. So you can also, if you're so inclined, have a single node deployment and throw it on one server for one environment. But part of the point of OpenShift being deployed on multiple servers is the scalability of it. So now if you have you normally have like, 2 or 3 dev environments. You don't need to install WebSphere 2 or 3 times. You can deploy 2 or 3 Maximo Application Suite environments in a single OpenShift, and it keeps it a little more organized. And I guess with the scalability there, you can put like as many environments as you want in a single OpenShift. And I guess one quick note at the bottom here is IBM did engage, or I guess purchase Red Hat for this push. And they've been a massive leader in containerization around the globe. And I know Candy always loves to bring up that it was like one of the largest IT purchases in recent history. I think it's something like enormous.
It was. Yeah, I was at $34 billion. And I think that's where, but it was about IBM transitioning their whole business, from the end of Jenny Rometty's time as the CEO and chairperson to Arvind now really prioritizing containerization and looking at how Cloud Pak for Data transforms the way we deploy these big enterprise applications. And so I think that even Miles, I've heard you talk about, 4 years ago, you were already looking at and working with IBM on containerization before this upgrade had come out, and we were moving in that direction. But IBM's transformed their business based upon that. So divesting parts of hardware or application software that didn't fit into this model around the shift to cloud, hybrid cloud. And I think that's the other part is IBM really proudly talks about how they have moved some of the largest financial institutions in the world to the cloud securely, and Red Hat being a big part of how they do that.
Yeah, I would like to throw one clarification on that. I think saying it's designed specifically for the cloud, I know freaks out a couple of people. It's not necessarily designed specifically for the cloud. It does make cloud options more accessible though. So it doesn't make on-prem solutions less accessible. It just so happens
Absolutely, yeah,
easier to use. So it does make it look like it's pushing things that direction, but it's just that, people can do it on cloud easier now.
And I think that's why we call it hybrid cloud, right? So when we go meet with clients, how many of them aren't hosting something, right? Or have their ERP or their HR or there's some components that are hosted solutions. That's just a reality of where we are at today. And thinking about that in the context of having the ability to, you don't have to, but having the ability to move Maximo and some of those other applications to the cloud, or even components of it. Where does your production versus some of your test or dev environments live? Those can now be, you can make different decisions about where those, who owns the server that those are hosted on.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you don't need all of your dev environments and stuff running at once. Like I know I have specifically a couple of clients that like verge into the double digits for dev environments, and they just happen to have them because it's a little bit cumbersome to make new servers in WebSphere, make new EAR files and stuff like that. And now, like the part of the purpose of this is you can, make new environments and blow them away. So ideally, if you're now working with 10 to 15 dev environments, you can maybe squish that down to maybe about half, because you're back to the land of concurrency where you can bring them up when you need them and get rid of them when you don't need them anymore. And I think that's going to make it a lot easier for people to deal with the infrastructure, because I guess I would like to throw one point in here that definitely it does take a little bit more infrastructure per like Maximo instance, but like when does modernization of technology not require a little bit more power? I recently saw an ad from 1999 that was like 10 megabytes of RAM, the last computer you'll ever need. And I think like I look at my laptop right now, and I think mine has like 32 gigabytes of RAM and a couple of terabytes of hard drive space. Like, I think that's inevitable, that there will be some upward shift in resource requirement, but it's not going to be insane. And you can take steps to minimize that and use it more efficiently for sure.
And there's a benefit too with some of these additional requirements, right? As long as there is space with your redundancy and scalability of OpenShift, you can now, and this is sharing something customers are very excited about or interested, is when you have shutdowns or turnarounds and you have a mass influx of people and transactions, the system can support that and be set up. There's a level of automation that's included with configuration, and it can be set up to provide the resources necessary for that and the environments, right? So this doesn't have to be a manual task.
Yeah, and
I think just to add to that, Patrick, this is another licensing one. If you have a massive influx of people for 3 months, you can buy or rent subscription licenses to cater for the influx, and when you finish, pass the app points back. So that flexibility of the licensing comes in and helps on that example.
Absolutely.
yeah, and I would like to point out, I know like we keep going back to licensing, but on the bottom of the slide, there's the easier access to installation material. I know before, if you wanted to get scheduler, you'd have to go out, you'd have to like reach out to your sales rep, you'd have to buy licenses, get a license key, and then go into partner role, download your material. Now you just have app points en masse, and you can say, oh, do I have space enough with my app points for this other solution? Download. You're not losing license keys on your servers. You're not like struggling to move over your installation material through RDP sessions or anything silly like that. It's just made a lot more accessible, which is really nice, and all kinds of ties it, and they all tie into that one licensing model.
As well as calibration, right? I know we talk a lot about scheduler, but calibration is included too. So that there's additional opportunities, and those are the things that we want to start to talk about with the strategy of what does upgrading look like, and what are you hoping to achieve out of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a few more minutes. Did we want to go over some of the other items that are in the application suite? I can go ahead and go to that side that everybody loves.
Okay. And Candy, your favorite is visual inspection. So do you want to lead off with that one?
Sure. I mean, it's a close tie to assist, Tony, but okay. Maximo VI has actually been something I'm really excited about. It's something that IBM started developing many years ago, and I like to say it went from software group through systems into IBM consulting, and then back to software group, and had become a fully formed solution by the time it got back. It's super powerful. It came back in with the industry models needed to have sort of that immediate benefit, and you can train it with very few images. And so that part where, from an industry specific standpoint, whether you're in energy and looking at drone footage that would be capturing vegetation management, or corrosion if you're in civil infrastructure, and being able to train those models really quickly, and then tie that back into Maximo at an asset level so that you can create that plan around the management of the asset. And I think that's one of the things that Cohesive also delivers is that end-to-end. How are you building that process from the virtual asset and the design, build, and engineering, and that continuous life cycle of the asset all the way through to the maintain and operate, and looking at that in how we can use tools like visual inspection that tie into a digital twin and then all the way again, like I said, back to maintaining the asset. And I would also say assist. We've had some fun talking about that in prepping for this webinar. We were, I had a washer and dryer installed recently, and the technician shows up to set them up, and they're such a smart asset that he's like talking to somebody back that's an expert on how to actually set up the the washer and dryer. And I thought, oh, assist, that's it right there. You're a technician, you're out in the field, you don't have the expertise, but you can see it right there on your mobile device through the mobile app, where you have work order history, or you're rolling in with the right equipment to fix that asset. Oh, wait, I'm here, I have the part, but I don't know entirely. I need to access that expert back in the office to help walk me through while I'm on the ground with the asset. I think Assist is another one that actually does make me really excited, because it's that IBM AI that they're making a major investment in not only the data you have around the work orders and the asset, but you also have the artificial intelligent machine learning that can help assist you in the maintenance.
I mean, as exciting as the AI is, I feel like the thing that I think is the most exciting about that is, I think like the Assist shows, again, IBM like kind of being tuned into what people are using. Like a couple of years ago, I did some electrical work, and instead of having the journeyman electrician come in and do a physical inspection in person, they're like, oh yeah, download this app, we're gonna do it through your phone, you can measure stuff on the phone, and it's over, instead of having me drive 30 minutes to your place and 30 minutes back and do all this, and maybe I'll give you like a schedule of when I might arrive during the day. So I think that's becoming just so much more common in general, but like IBM actually saw that and was like, oh yeah, we need to we need to get on this this bandwagon and start actually making these apps do what people are doing in the real world. And I think that's a good sign.
And I would say IBM is on the forefront of that. It's not even the bandwagon. They're leading this, because Assist is actually, again, a GBS developed asset that is a decade old. The fact that we're now delivering it in a single suite with Manage, they're really tying all of this together. So the Monitor, Health, Predict start to move our clients in that direction of utilizing their historian data or sensor data, and start to look at the health of your asset from a different way than we have historically, and providing that in a single platform delivered on OpenShift is a huge accelerator for our clients' time to value. Again, you don't have to move there today, but the option is there as we look at your roadmap and where our clients are going to that digital transformation. And again, the younger workforce, bringing in that technically curious generation of folks. Like I was in a user group a few years ago where one of the guys maintaining an asset was like, I don't need a sensor, I have a stick, and I go in and I touch the pump with the stick, and I that's the vibration analysis. And I was like, all right, cool. Behind that person is somebody who's going to want to have a reliable reading and be able to gather that data so that they can start to do the health of the asset, respond to it based upon what the asset is telling us, and not just that like calendar-based maintenance that maybe our clients have been used to in the past.
I think that's hilarious with the stick. And like, I bet that person still writes that down on a sheet of paper.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
Sheet. I don't mean to slam that person, but I'm sure Excel sheets floating around there.
With the shift, there is a new generation of people moving into these positions. Other folks are retiring, and they are the next generation. They're used to using apps. They're used to not just doing it by feel, which the guy that's got 30 years experience and he knows exactly what that sounds like is fantastic, but you can't really teach that. That's something that he's learned over so many years. So having the actual sensors is probably more efficient at that point, but it just is part of that whole evolution of moving forward and modernizing Maximo.
But on that example, Kat, you've got the experienced guy who's close to retirement. He can sit in the office. He can have 6 or 8 junior engineers out in the field, and he can tell them what it sounds like because they've got the mobile phone and they use Assist. And during COVID, this was a big thing. It was the older guys who were more vulnerable to COVID. They could stay in the office, and the younger guys were in the field, and it worked. So there's a very good value there.
Okay, so are there any last thoughts that anybody would like to share? We've got we're right up on 10:30, but or on the, I should say, on the hour. Any last minute thoughts before we wrap up?
The only thing I would say is if anyone is going to Maximo World this year, please stop by and visit us. We will be demoing all of this in the booth and more. We've got some fantastic sessions, and we would love to see you in person and answer any questions you have about the journey to the Maximo Application Suite. And thank you very much for joining us today. We will have more webinars coming in this series. And so if there's anything that you want to see specifically or more detail from today's session, please reach out to us directly.
Thank you so much. And this concludes today's webinar. On behalf of the MAS Mythbusters, I want to thank everyone who attended today. We realized that we could only address a couple of the questions that were sent to us. We will send answers along with a link to a recording of this session and a copy of the slide deck, which would be available in about 24 hours. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully at Maximo World or at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, team.
Thanks everyone for joining.